When you're a young player in soccer, and I assume in every single sport, one of the first things you learn is the importance of communication. The difference in the quality of your team if people on the team are communicating, they're talking to each other, everyone knows what's happening, versus if you're just quiet, not doing anything, not saying anything to anyone. Because at least from a soccer perspective, you get the ball and someone's on your back and you didn't check your shoulder and no one's talking to you saying that someone's on your back, you're not going to know someone's there, so you're going to lose the ball. Or if someone's wide open in open space and they're not calling for the ball, and you have the ball in a certain area and you have the passing lane open, you're not going to pass. You're going to keep your head down. You're going to keep dribbling. So just a couple examples there, but I think in every sport it's the same. You learn very early on the importance of communication. Then as you get older, it gets a little bit more specific. It gets more. It's not just just talk to someone about something. It's about how you communicate. And I guess in the world of work, in the world of employment, I honestly still don't quite get some of the nuances of it. I'm going to be completely honest. But I've learned a couple of harsh lessons when it comes to the importance of communication, what actual good communication looks like. So I'm going to share a little bit of my wisdom with you today and talk about what communication actually looks like, what it means to be a good communicator to other people. So obviously it's easy to say, like, on the football field, right? And in any other sport. So when someone doesn't know someone's behind them, right? They don't have eyes on the back of their head. You can talk to them, tell them something, right? Like in baseball, it's like when you get the ball, most of the time, well, good teams, right? People will be shouting the number in terms of the base you're supposed to throw to. So they'll shout two and you throw it to second. That means before you're looking at the ball, you're picking it up, before you even have to throw that you're going to throw to second base, right? That's where the play is going to be, right? That's good communication. That's good teams, right? But like in all sports, that's the case. But it kind of gets a little bit different, right? Because then as you get older, it should be the standard, right? It should be the standard you should be talking to your teammates, right? Now it kind of gets a little bit more deeper. How like now success versus failure. It's a little bit more of a wider scope. It's a wider scale. There needs to be different levels of communication that you need to have on the field that allows you to succeed as you get older. It can't just be like, oh, man on when you get the ball or yeah, pass to me. No, it should be. It then becomes more about, okay, what are you saying in the dressing room? What are you saying? How are your relationships with your teammates? So, so what does it mean to actually communicate, right? It gets more nuanced. And of course, like I'm going to talk about my situation, my stories in my working environments that kind of caused me to kind of get this little bit of like a whoa moment, right? Like a harsh lesson that I learned and a bit of a talking to from my boss. So, so like this happened a few months ago, but I do want to kind of shed some light to it. That sometimes it's not about what you say, it's about how you say it. And sometimes you need to be respectful. You need to have the balance of being respectful but direct. Sometimes you could be a little bit unclear in what you're saying. And it can be a little bit mysterious, right? And that's not good communication. If you're telling someone something they need to do, or you're advising people about certain things, again, whether in sports, whether on the field, in the locker room, or in a working environment, this can apply to all things. That's why I use the soccer analogy to start this video and start like kind of tying the two together. Sometimes you can say something and it's unclear. People don't know what you mean when you're telling them something. So, for example, like again, bring it back to soccer, you could be a coach, right? You're communicating to your team the tactics that you want them to play. But they actually don't understand what you're saying. When you say stuff like you got to go in the wide inside channel and you overlap, and depending on the age group that you're coaching, sometimes you need to actually break it down further. So it's not necessarily about what you say sometimes, it's about how you say it. And I went in some situations in my recent, well, it's not recent anymore, but in my most recent job where I got into a couple of problems because of my inability to communicate properly. I was trying to respect people too much, but reality is I needed to just be direct, and sometimes it needs to be a little bit harsh. It needs to be a little bit just out there, but at least it's super clear and there's no ambiguity in what you're saying. It's absolutely 100% clear, even if it's a little bit harsh, and if it's a little bit more of a harsh truth and a harsh saying, right? It's like, you're not doing this well enough, I need you to do this better, right? It's like, I don't like when you talk to me like this. those are examples of how you can communicate in that type of a way. Those are some sentences that you could say that can allow you to communicate in that type of way. I don't like when you communicate to me like this. I don't like when you talk to me like this. And again, it applies anywhere, in any team setting, right? Workplace environment, or in a sports setting, in any other team setting. You can use those types of phrases to get your message across in a little bit more of a harsh way, but at least you are being clear and concise about what the situation is and what you expect. So I had moments where I wasn't necessarily clear about things. I just said something, and then my bosses took it the wrong way, basically, and then it caused all sorts of problems. It caused me to have a talking to. It caused, all sorts of things that pissed me off. It pissed them off. But reality is, I wasn't trying to be like that. Like, I was trying to say, hey, like, this is the situation that's happening, versus like versus something else that happened, right? And it's just, honestly, it was a stupid situation, but I think if you're living a life where you are 100% self accountable for things, it would be in those situations. And I don't want to get too deep into it, because it's like I don't want to call them out too much, and I don't want to expose them too much. But I believe that, honestly, it was their stupidity. But it's easy to blame them versus just putting it on myself. What could I have done better? And it's very easy to say I could have wrote down the text messages or communicate to them in a better, more concise, more clear and obvious way, so that those situations could have been avoided in as much of a way as possible. Maybe it still would have happened, because those are just the nature of my boss, and that's why I didn't like the boss, and that's why I quit in the first place for that job. But the point is, there is definitely a part that I could have done better on the communication front. So what it means to communicate, you got to be clear, you got to be concise. It's got to be absolutely it's got to be absolutely clear. Like, everyone needs to understand exactly what you're saying. So sometimes it needs to be harsh. Sometimes, if you can get it off with respect for the person, great. But sometimes it can be a little bit watered down in what you're trying to say to people when you're focused on, like, respect and stuff like that. So if you can say stuff with respect and clarity, that's good. But sometimes you need to be a little bit firm, and you have to be a little bit harsh. But if you get the message across, and if you are 100% honest with the situation, that is good communication. Another part of good communication is just pure honesty, right? To communicate well is to be 100% honest about how you feel about a situation, and you got to hash this out with whoever you're trying to hash this out with. So I'll give another soccer example, because that's kind of where we're at, right? If you have a teammate and you don't like his attitude to the game, right? Like you make a mistake, and then he's the first person to talk to you about it, say, hey, what are you doing, man? Like, come on, man, play the game, right? Like, I've played with players like that. It's pretty terrible to play with players like that. Good communication is you telling him, I don't like it when you do this. This doesn't help me play better. It only helps me play worse. So stop doing it. That's good communication. Versus just kind of like just waving it off, and then just being in your own head, and then letting his words kind of get to you. Admittedly, in my life and certain times on the field, I have had moments where that has happened, where I should have probably been a lot more clear about things, but I just kind of, and he was saying bad stuff, and it's sad, because it's your own teammate. You want your teammates to be lifting you up, but sometimes you play with players like that. So it's up to you as a good communicator to tell him straight up, hey, this is not helping. This is only hurting. So stop and change your attitude, right? Sometimes, for them to just wake up and snap into the right frame of mind, you do absolutely have to be harsh and firm in that way. So it can be in a sports setting, and it can be in a workplace setting. It can be anywhere else that you're dealing with, any other situation you're dealing with. Sometimes you need that. But that is good communication. That is what good communication looks like. You are completely honest. You're clear, concise, and sometimes harsh, but sometimes it can just be respectful. But if those kind of traits and those tendencies are in how you communicate, you will communicate well. You will be a good communicator when it comes to whatever situation you're in. And good communication is one of the good aspects of a leader. And if you want to be a good leader in your life, every environment, every group setting can only really succeed if there is a good leader, or a good set of leaders, a good few leaders in those settings and in those moments. A group can only really succeed if there are people that can lead. And if you're a good communicator, that is another aspect of being a good leader. So that is kind of what I've learned from my life in terms of what it means to be a good communicator, what it actually looks like. Sometimes it can be harsh, but it needs to be completely clear and concise and obvious what you want other people to be doing. And you don't want to be bossy. I think that's maybe one more thing I want to talk about. You don't want to be bossy, right? You don't want to be like, "Oh, do this, do that." No. You need to walk that line between trying to get the guy to do the thing you want him to do and to do the thing that you know is better for the team or for the group, right? Like obviously in the soccer setting, if your own teammate is talking trash to you and criticizing you for a mistake you made, that's not good for anyone, right? It's not good for anyone. But you don't want to actually be bossy to him. You want to be firm, but you don't want to say like, don't do this, don't do that, don't be like this, don't be like that, right? You don't want to be like, oh, you're a piece of garbage, right? You're a piece of shit for saying these things. Stop. No, you have to still have that level of respect, but you're not trying to boss them around. You're trying to do what's best for the team. You're trying to do what's best for the group, and communicating in this way, in what you believe will be better for the group, is the best way to go about it. So you don't want to be a bossy boss either. And especially if you are actually like an employer, like you're actually like a boss of a certain group of people, you're actually the leader of a certain group of people. Those are the worst bosses. They're just bossy. Like there's not anything good about the way they communicate. It's just telling you to do this, to do that, like just being on your ass all the time. And those are like the worst bosses. So if you ever get into the privileged position where you are an actual privileged position, you are actually a leader of a group of people, you're actually the boss of a group of people, you ought not to be bossy. Communicate in a proper way, but always show respect to the people, and don't think of yourself as high and mighty just because you're in a better position. So you don't want to be like the bossy boss. No one likes that type of person, and no one will actually do what you want them to do if you're that type of a person who's just bossy. And that's, I think, a level of disrespect. So always there needs to be a level of respect. Sometimes it can vary based on the extremity of the situation. Sometimes you do have to be harsher and more firm about your statements and more firm about what you're telling people to do. But you cannot kind of remove that respect. You cannot remove that respect. You cannot be so ultra bossy in the situation. You need to be firm. You need to be obvious and concise in what you're saying, but respectful. And you got to be completely honest about the situation. And you got to always communicate from a level playing field. That, we're teammates here, right? Whether in sports, on the field, or in a workplace environment, in school, in projects, in even in like family and friend groups, it's like you're on a level playing field. So if you communicate from a level playing field, not from I'm higher and mightier and better than you, it's definitely way better to actually get people to realize, okay, if we do this, it'll be better for the group. It'll be better for the greater good of this whole situation. So those are the types of things that I have found, I have learned in my life that make a good communicator. I've looked at the things that have made a bad communicator in my life, in myself, in my mistakes, and also other people that have been bad communicators to me as well. And I've kind of learned, I've kind of brought it together, like those are the types of values and traits that you need to have when you are communicating in a good way. So you need to just be completely honest, right? You need to be completely honest. So one more thing is that it can get deep, right? Sometimes you can try and be firm with someone because people react in different ways. People have different ways of looking at situations. You can be firm to someone. You be like, hey, I don't like that you're doing this. You're going to have to try and do this better. And someone might take that the wrong way. So then you follow up that type of a statement with, I say this not because I'm trying to be hard on you. I'm saying this not because I'm I'm not trying to pick on you. I truly just believe that this is a way where you can do better, and this is a way where you can improve. And I want the best for you in this whole environment, in this situation. I want the best for you. I want the best for the group. And this is a way where I think you can do better. So it's not something to pick on you. So you can follow up a harsh statement with kind of a caveat statement, which can make someone who kind of can be a little bit negative at times, it can maybe fall into their shell a little bit when you're a little harsh on them. It can make them feel a little bit better about themselves, right? And it can make them feel a little bit better about you because you're not trying to be that bossy boss guy that's stepping on people. No, you're trying to say things and and lead people and guide people to for the greater good of the group and for the greater good of that person as well. So always kind of think about that. And always when you're communicating with people, think about how people will react to things you say. Sometimes people will, sometimes if people are like a hustler, a go-getter, like that positive mindset, it's like you'll say something like that and they'll be like, all right, that's fine. Let's keep going, right? If you're a coach, right? If you're a leader in any regard, people will say that and be like, all right, coach, let's go, right? All right, captain, let's go. I get it. I understand. Let's do it. Let's make it happen. Some people will react like that. Other people will not react like that. Other people will be like kind of confused. They'll be like, "Well, why are you telling me this? Like I'm doing my job. I'm trying my best." Like and that can make them question you and they can make them question themselves. So, you need to kind of be aware. You need to have that emotional intelligence, that EQ where you need to know how people are responding to certain things you say. And if people are responding in a good way, good. And you follow up with them and you try and help them grow. If they're responding in not a positive way, you need to add extra statements and caveats and reassurance of the situation that truly you're there and you're telling people these things because you believe that it's better for the group and that you are on a level playing field, that you're not high and mighty, and you make that super clear to that person. That will help those types of people kind of be on that exact level playing field as the kind of go-getters, those hustlers, those like people that when you are harsh on them, some people you need to be harsh on them for them to do better. But other people being harsh on them will make them kind of do worse. So you need to balance it out and you need to know which person is which and you need to maybe even adjust the way you communicate to different people. So maybe you should just not be so harsh on one certain person because you know that they take it too seriously. And other people that need that kind of push, that little slap on the wrist and that little kick in the butt, they can kind of respond better to it. You can be a little bit more harsh to them. So those are kind of the all-encompassing things when it comes to communication, how to be a good communicator. It really, like to summarize it, it is pure honesty, respect, but sometimes also being harsh to people, knowing what people respond into situations in different ways, being clear, making sure there's no room for questioning, not being a boss, communicating from a level playing field of respect, and always doing it for the greater good of that person, for the greater good of that group. If it's just something that you have in your mind, you shouldn't always say what you have on your mind at every single second of every day. Truly say things that and tell people things and lead people in a way that can help them and help the group improve. And a communicator is one of the great qualities of a good leader, and good leaders make for a good environment, for a good group, and for a successful situation, successful team, successful group. So that is the kind of all-encompassing way that you should communicate. That is what a good communicator looks like, and that is one of the important aspects of what it means to be a leader. Being a leader is not all about communication, but it definitely helps. It definitely helps smoothen out rough situations, and it helps grow the good situations if you do it in the right way. So that is all I gotta say when it comes to communication. I hope you learned something today, and I hope that it can help you, that these guidelines and this advice in this episode can help you be a better communicator in your life as well. But that's all I gotta say. So thank you for watching this episode of the 365 Podcast. As always, I ask that you show your support in any way you can on the show by leaving a like, subscribing on YouTube, following on Spotify, watching some of the other great episodes I've made on this show. I made an episode talking about specifically what it means to be a leader. You can go watch that as well. That's probably the best episode where you can piggyback off of this type of an episode if you enjoyed this content, these types of guidelines. And of course, there are many other great episodes I've made on the show throughout the over 300 days that I've made, 310 days that I've already been making episodes on this show. I make an episode every day for a whole year. We are reaching really the crunch time, nearing the end of the show. So there's so many great episodes I've planned for the future for these last couple of months of the show. I encourage you to join the ride and join the journey as well. So thank you for being here. Show your support in any way you can. Continue to glorify God every day throughout your life and truly learn to be a good communicator in your days, and you will see that helps you and that helps many other people improve in their lives. So thank you for watching this episode of the 365 Podcast. As always, I'll see you tomorrow for the next one.